Welcome to our Mad Money edition of Draft Utopia, folks. We're going to talk about the Bears and the Bulls, the players you need to watch for in terms of draft stock, the Bulls, players whose stock are going up. You need to buy their draft stock now while you can, while you're in the scouting community. And then you got the Bears. I'm going to quickly break down all the players in our top five really quickly because I feel like this is really – there really isn't a bull on the board until number 6. Ed Oliver, Nick Bosa, Jonah Williams, Greedy Williams, and Julian Love. So not really much changes in the top 5. Greedy Williams moves up from 5 to 4. The top 3 remains the same, and Julian Love moves up from 7 to 5. So there really isn't much to say about this top 5. If you want to quickly recap the top 5 overall players and the adjustments we made, you can, but I think number 6 is the player we're probably going to focus on first, and maybe number 7 because I want to focus on some of the players that we've already talked about the top 5. It's a good top 5, but the first 2 balls on the board are up at number 6 and number 7, and number 6 is a guy I've seen mocks at Browns. That's Quinnen Williams out of Alabama. Mark Suba showed me his A&M tape. I wasn't as impressed with his Ole Miss tape, but his A&M tape was very good to the point where he was block shedding. He was using rip moves and spin moves and swim moves, all of that good stuff. And he has more power and more size than Ed Oliver. So Quinnen Williams out of Alabama, despite being a sophomore redshirt, is one of the top prospects in the draft and a consensus top 10 pick among a lot of boards. And he's the first bull as far as draft stock goes. His stock's through the roof right now. And what do you think of Williams? Have you seen his tape?
I saw some of them yesterday, and he's a good player. I'm not going to take that away from him. I think he's a little overhyped right now as compared to his counterparts. But as far as a bull, yeah, I could see a lot of people buying him right now.
I agree with you to a point. He is overhyped to a degree. I think a lot of people in the scouting community, but he looks like a consensus top 10 player. But it comes down to him keeping the momentum. Number 7, this is the next bull on our list. Byron Murphy out of Washington had 10 deflections, just like Sidney Jones, and he held Arizona State wide receiver and Keel Harry to 5 receptions for 20 receiving yards earlier this season. So, and Harry did not score a touchdown on Byron Murphy. Murphy also a sophomore redshirt. And he's a player who had double-digit deflections last year as well as a freshman redshirt. So he's very consistent, and Washington's another one of these schools that churns out corners year in and year out. And Byron Murphy out of Washington could be in this conversation with Greedy Williams and Julian Love. And the reason I moved Byron Murphy all the way up from 31 or 30 to 7 is because he's consistent. DeAndre Baker, while he's been good this year, he's had games where he's gone 2-3 deflections, and he's had games where he's got 0 deflections, 0 interceptions. He looks very shaky in coverage. He's been inconsistent in that department. While I love DeAndre Baker, let's face it, Byron Murphy has just been more consistent. And that's why I think he's the second bull of the draft and someone you should keep an eye on moving forward.
Byron Murphy is I think he's so consistent. Washington has always put out fundamentally sound cornerbacks. And I think that's where Murphy really shines. Because, people say, not Jason Peters, but Peters, when he came out of Washington, plays for Kansas City.
Marcus Peters, but yeah.
Kansas City. Yeah. Everybody's like, I love his athleticism. I love this. I love that. But when you really got down to it, watch the tape, watch the combine, it was all about the fundamentals. Watch this kid, all about the fundamentals. I think that's where he's going to come in and really set himself apart.
Yeah, Marcus Trufant, Desmond Trufant, Sidney Jones, and Marcus Peters, all Washington cornerbacks. Washington's done a great job with corners over the years. And Byron Murphy, the next corner in line. We've talked about Josh Allen in the past for the past year or so. He's really put it together this year. He's definitely a top 10 talent. He stayed at number 8. And Keel Harry, he's the top receiver in the draft. He's made some Odell Beckham-like catches. You could argue he's raw, but he reminds me a lot of Randy Moss. So I'm just mentioning those players briefly because there's going to be 100 players on the board. Number 10, though, Jerry Tillery out of Notre Dame. This is a guy who I had in the 62. We moved him all the way up to 10. He's been fantastic for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish at defensive tackle this year. He can play interior. He can play on the outside. I think Tillery's going to be one of these defensive tackles. And it's a very strong defensive tackle draft. But when you consider he's got 8 tackles for a loss, 7 sacks, he's really been consistent. 6'7", 305. Great size, and he's got great athleticism too. So Jerry Tillery's my 3rd bull of the draft. I don't know if he's a top 10 player, but I have him barely rounding out the top 10 at the moment. And he could lose this spot. With all the competition at defensive tackle this year, Tillery, this is a spot that's sort of wide open, but I'm giving it to Tillery for the time being.
I'm selling that one. Like, no offense to him, but when you look at the history of defensive tackles from Notre Dame, it doesn't really scream, you know.
Yeah, Lewis Nix the third out of the league, and that other Notre Dame tackle that the Jaguars drafted a few years ago, no longer on the team. Sheldon Day. Yeah. It's like Yeah, Lewis Nix the third and Sheldon Day were the last 2 Notre Dame defensive tackles drafted, and neither panned out.
So I'll sell that.
All right, that's fair enough. And speaking of selling, let's get to some Bears. Devin White and Devin Bush were both in the top 10 the last time we did a draft game update. They're now outside the top 10. Devin White's missed some time with injuries. I don't know if durability is a concern with him, but he's getting injured. The same year Quan Alexander got on IR for the Buccaneers and Quan went to LSU, so I just think that's kind of ironic. But Devin White and Devin Bush are Bears. The whole middle linebacker class is not a bear market, but these 2 middle linebackers were supposed to be top 10 talents. I still think Devin White could go top 10. Okay, he's not out of the top 10 conversation. He's just out right now because of his injuries. If the Raiders get the 10th pick from the Cowboys and both these linebackers are still on the board, Devin White will be a Raider. He'll probably go number 10. But right now it's a wait-and-see thing with me with these 2 linebackers.
I really liked last year's linebacker class. I'm not really as sold on this one. A lot of potential in both, but I'm going to stay on this one. I want to see a little bit more from them, so
I think both are first-round talents, but I don't think either is a top 10 talent. And it really comes down to the market. And when I say it comes down to the market, it comes down to the market for a middle linebacker. The Giants at 1, the Raiders at 2, the Niners at 3. No. Bills at 4. They just drafted Edmonds. No. Cardinals at 5. They could use a middle linebacker, but I don't think they'll take one as early as 5. Browns, no. Jets, no. Broncos, no. The Colts just took Darius Leonard. He's had a strong rookie year. So they're not going to be in the market for middle linebacker. So that really leaves the Raiders at 10, the Lions at 11 if they want a 43, a second middle linebacker, and the Buccaneers at 13. The Buccaneers could lose Quan Alexander to free agency. And then you've got the Packers if Oren Burks does not pan out, does not take that leap. So you've got maybe 4 teams, maybe the Ravens at 15 if they lose Mosley. So you got maybe 4 or 5 teams in the top 15 that could use middle linebackers, but nobody until number 10 when the Raiders are on the clock. So, yeah, it's a wait-and-see thing with these linebackers for sure. At 13, we've got Christian Wilkins. He belongs there We know how good this guy is. He really stepped up versus Boston College last night. But I want to get to the next two. Bears are the Bulls on the list. We're going from Bears back to Bulls. Jeffrey Simmons is at 14 out of Mississippi State. Mississippi State defensive tackle has 9.5 tackles for a loss. Very effective. And then my fifth Bull of the day is Amani Uwari out of Penn State. This is a guy I did a film session on when I was assigned the Penn State versus Pitt game a few weeks ago. And this guy really stood out on tape. He was very good. I did a YouTube film session of this guy before he became a household name, a first-round pick on draft boards like CBS and Walter Football. And ironically, Dane Brugler did do an interview with him for The Athletic. And this is a guy whose stock is moving up. He already has 10 deflections in the season, and he looked very good on tape versus Pittsburgh at Heinz Field, which I did a film cut for. So, and he's continued to be consistent week in, week out. And this guy wasn't even a starter last year because they had two corners that were starters. First-year starter coming in, playing well, and he's playing so well that he's being hyped up as a top 15 guy. It doesn't mean he'll pan out necessarily, but he's playing like a top 15 pick. He's doing all the right things. So we'll see what happens with Amani. Jeffrey Simmons and Amani Uwari out of Penn State. I'm just curious which one of these two Bulls are you buying more into at this point, with both in the top 15 on my board?
Right now, well, they play two different positions, so buying one over the other is a matter of team preference. I mean, if you said they played the same position, it'd be a simple one. But Jeffrey Simmons is a guy I watched last night, was on lunch, and he was good. I liked his game. I'm not sure of his overall stats because, well, your draft game is really fair when it comes to height, weight, and such.
I can go to CFB stats and look up that stuff. That's what I do. When I go through, I can look up the CFB stats because whenever I do research on the draft game, I use CFB stats. So he had 2.5 tackles for a loss versus Alabama last night. He was at 9.5 on the year heading into the game. So he had either 2 or 2.5. He had 2 tackles for a loss versus Alabama. Alabama shut out Mississippi State, but Jeffrey Simmons still had 2 tackles for a loss. Didn't get any sacks, but he did get 2 tackles for a loss. He did get some pressure. And even though he might not get you sacks, he can get pressure on the quarterback. And he can use his strength and his athleticism to win battles. He can push linemen back. He might not necessarily maintain blocks or win them, but he can push linemen back and apply pressure. So he does have some strong traits to his game, to say the least.
Yeah, well, I was actually talking about height and weight and such,
but he's 6'4", 300. Simmons.
Okay, because he played fast, and so to have that much weight on you and to play as fast as he did, that's pretty impressive. So I'm really liking, because that's why I wanted to see the weight, because I'm looking at he plays fast.
This is Mississippi State's best defensive tackle since Fletcher Cox. I don't think he's going to be as good as Fletcher Cox, but I do think he'll be a solid starter. But that's what I thought about Fletcher Cox. I thought he'd be an okay player, but not an elite one. And I was wrong. Fletcher Cox has been a Pro Bowl caliber player. He's exceeded my expectations. Maybe he's not necessarily elite, but he's exceeded my expectations.
Well, what I was going to say is, if you play fast, my worry is maybe you'll be undersized. Knowing that he's at 300 pounds, I mean, that's a really nice indicator. I could see this guy making it up into the top 10 before the end of the season.
Yeah, because it's after Williams and Oliver, it's a crapshoot right now, defensive tackle. And I'm just going based off of production at this point in the process because it's still very early. And we'll get to some Bears here. DeAndre Baker and Rashawn Gary are Bears because DeAndre Baker's just been hot and cold throughout the year. One moment, he's doing well. The other game, he's not having any deflections. The consistency's not adding up in week to week, but he's still a top corner in this class. I know some people, I know Chris Robbins and Oren still have this guy as the #1 ranked cornerback in the draft. So he has some talent. He has a lot of skill. So, I mean, he hasn't hurt his stock. He's not the top 5, top 10 guy we hyped him up to be, but he's still a top 20 player. And the same could be said for Rashawn Gary. And the only reason I say that is because Rashawn Gary went from being a top 8 player in the preseason to being a top 20 player. And that's mainly due to the fact that Gary missed a few games with injuries. That's the only reason. He's still a first-round talent, but when you're weeding out a board from start to finish, when you got this much competition at defensive tackle, you take a fall. And Gary's taken a minor. It's a speed bump. I wouldn't even call this a fall because it's not falling out of the first round. He's just going from top 10 to top 20. That's a speed bump. That's not a fall. That's a speed bump. And he can easily work his way back to the top 10 with a strong combine.
Well, as far as DeAndre Baker goes, yeah, 5'11", 185. I mean, the guy is pretty well built. And he's from, where is he from? Dade County, Miami, Florida, that football factory. He knows how to play the game and play it with flash, as has been shown this year. He's got 29 tackles, 2 interceptions, 8 pass breakups, a tackle for loss, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery. You know, the guy he's a player. You know, he's a dog. He gets in there, he's a dog. So, he puts his nose in there, he shows some attitude, gets it done. So I could see him. These people who put him as the #1 corner, I cannot argue that. But I think he's another one of these guys that gets back in the top 10 because, from 5 to 10, it's wide open. And I think he gets back in the top 10. As far as Rashawn Gary goes, now, Rashawn Gary's been a guy I've been high on for a couple years. And the big thing that has really gotten to me with this whole Rashawn Gary thing, and where he's ranked and what he's doing, is that yesterday, despite Michigan's win, where did the touchdown against them come from? And right up the middle, those guys just got pushed out of the way. Yeah, I know it's just one play, but, I mean, that, for me, really ends up hurting. And because it's like, another thing that hurts him, 6'5", 283, not even 290 pounds. He may end up, if he can't put on some muscle, he may end up having to play
defensive end.
34 defensive end, or the
43 defensive end for that matter. He might be an edge. Like, I was honestly considering putting D-line/edge for Rashawn Gary like I did at Oliver, because I think that may end up where Gary ends up playing if he doesn't put on some weight.
Yeah, and I can totally understand that because he does have that issue. Who was the last undersized defensive tackle to really succeed at defensive tackle? I have to go back to Warren Sapp. That was, I think, at his best, only 295, 300 pounds. That was 20 years ago, almost. So, I mean, is Rashawn Gary a Warren Sapp? I don't see it. It's like, I saw McCoy for the Bucs
I mean, he's not even as big as Maurice Hurst. Maurice Hurst was 283, 285. He kept putting on weight, but he had the heart condition. So Gary, we'll see what happens with Rashawn Gary. We'll see. It's a wait and see. I mean, he had great tape last year, but that was because he played next to Maurice Hurst, and now he just hasn't been that guy without Hurst. Even though he's a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, he just hasn't been that guy without Hurst.
Yeah, and I like his skill, but when you're that size and you have that much attention on you, that makes it difficult.
Yes, it does.
Now, the guy I really want to get to is next on the list at 18. This is a guy that is, I mean, he's a Mac boy. But I love these Mac boys. From Buffalo, Khalil Hodge, linebacker.
And this was a guy I pinpointed at the beginning of the season because this is a guy who could cover well. He could do everything well on tape. And I was like, well, if he does everything well on tape and he checks out all the boxes, he's one of the more underrated players in the draft. I know Broncos fans said he's a 4th rounder. No, this is a round 1 talent. I've seen the tape. I love what I see. This is a round 1 talent. I even got my friend Drake Holiday, who's a Ravens fan, to admit to me that this is a round 1 talent. I even got Ken LeBlanc, another avid listener of our podcast, to admit to me this is a round 1 talent. This guy's a stud and one of the best players in the draft. And whoever gets this guy is getting a steal.
Here's something for you. In 3 years, from 2016 till this year, and let's face it, this year ain't over yet.
He's had 100 tackles in all 3 seasons at Buffalo.
He has 387 total tackles. He's going to get well over 400. 20 and a half tackles for loss, 5 sacks, 2 interceptions, both coming in 2017. He's had 5 passes deflected in his career. I've seen some corners who only get 7 or 8 passes deflected in 3 years. So he's running there on that. Forced fumbles. He's got 2 forced fumbles. Also both came last year. And he's still got 2 games left, not counting bowl games. Now, the guy is also 6'1", 235. You might have a problem with his height or whatever, but he may end up being a 34, outside linebacker, but, at 34 he can also play inside. But I think a 34 defense would be his best fit at this point because he'll be able to use his ability to cover and his ability to get to the ball carrier in a much more, because 34 linebackers have far more responsibilities because of the fewer linemen. They have to watch the outside a little more. They have to keep outside contained. They have to be able to get into the trenches a lot more than that. 43.
Well, the Eagles are on the clock at 18. So if I'm the Chiefs or the Steelers, I'm trying to move up with the Eagles at 18 because I think Hodge would be an awesome fit for both the Steelers and the Chiefs' 34 defenses. But those teams pick way back in the draft. So if you're the Chiefs or the Steelers and you want an inside linebacker, Philadelphia at 18 is a team to call because Philadelphia doesn't really have a lot of needs. They could use another linebacker. They could use Hodge as an inside linebacker. Jordan Hicks has a tendency to be injured, but Hicks is effective when he's healthy. And I don't think the Eagles are going to take a middle linebacker at 18, even with their former Cal linebacker gone. So I feel like Philadelphia is a team that would move this pick in this scenario if they were picking at 18 because Jay Ajayi is in a contract year. I think they could get a running back, but I feel like the Eagles are the type of team that would trade down in this scenario. And I feel like Pittsburgh and Kansas City would both be good fits. Even the Rams would be a good fit to replace Alec Ogletree. There's a lot of teams in the back half of the first round that would make better fits. Washington, even Chicago, if they wanted to get rid of Nick Kwiatkowski and take another linebacker to pair with Roquan. There's a lot of teams that could use Khalil Hodge in the back half of round one that run the 34, and I feel like one of them at 18 would be a great way to trade up.
Yeah, the team that really came to mind when I was thinking of him was the Green Bay Packers. I mean, that was the team that immediately came to mind as an excellent fit because, like, they're not going to get rid of Matthews, but Matthews is getting older. They're going to need to have his eventual replacement, and who better to watch and learn from or to play beside to in the NFL today than Matthews, and then to step into his shoes when he's done. I mean, that just seems like the perfect fit for me.
Yeah, and we don't really have a lot of Bears until 25, so I am going to skip a little bit ahead. Raquan Davis, Isaiah Buggs, Bo Benchwale, Dalton Risner, Montez Sweat, Dexter Lawrence, all in the 19 through 24 range on our draft game. And the next Bear comes at 25. It's Deontay Thompson out of Alabama, and Anthony Jennings out of Alabama is 26. So you got two Crimson Tide players at 25 and 26 there. They're both Bulls on our board. Thompson sort of emerged as number one safety in this draft a while ago, but we put him on the board at 25. I watched his Ole Miss tape. It was okay. It wasn't great, but it was good enough to warrant this late first-round grade. I don't think he's the caliber of player Derwin James is, and Derwin James fell to 17, even though he checked out nearly all the boxes on tape. So I think Deontay Thompson at 25, that's an appropriate spot for him. And Anthony Jennings out of Alabama is not a guy I had a first-round grade on, but I watched his tape versus Missouri. He just schooled Paul Adams and got a lot of pressure on Drew Lock, and he's a guy who's great in coverage, and he knows how to get pressure on the quarterback despite not getting a lot of sacks. And I feel like as long as he's clean and he doesn't do anything illegal off the field, he's someone who could potentially push their way into the late first round. And I think both these guys are Bulls.
Well, with Deontay Thomas, I mean, he is a guy I'm looking at as a developmental prospect. You look at what he's done. Well, first I want you to look at, his measurables. I mean, he's 6'1", 6'2", 200 pounds. Then he comes around and he didn't play his freshman year. Then he comes back because he redshirted his freshman year, didn't play, comes back and has his freshman year, doesn't do much, plays a few games. Sophomore year, does some more, has some impressive limited time, has an interception, whatever. And this year, he, at 9 games thus far this year, he's got 31 tackles. He's 2.5 tackles for a loss. He's got 2 interceptions, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. I mean, so the thing I'm looking at him for is look at his rate of improvement. He has improved every year. But so that bodes well for his improvement as a professional. But what really gets me is, do you really want to take somebody who is a development player in the mid-first round? I mean, yeah, I could see Steelers taking a flyer on him, Patriots taking a flyer on him, those guys saying, hey, this kid's got great developmental skills, great overall talent.
This is not a strong safety class, but it feels like Thompson's the guy with the most upside.
But I could see a great coach telling a GM draft this guy. I can mold him into something. I can make him into something. So he might slip and go a little bit higher than we were expecting, depending on the team, because there are some wild cards in there. Right now everybody's talking about the Browns coaching search. The Browns aren't going to be the only team without a coach this year. There may be a new coach come in and say, Coach, I can do something with this kid. He's developmental, but he's a clean slate. Great athletically. He's a little bit wrong. I can mold him into something. He's got it athletically. And you could potentially see him going in the top 20 based on that.
Yep, and it's time for the next Bear. And I'm not going to go with a specific player. I'm actually going to go with a specific position. Yes, this is the first plot twist in our Mad Money show. I'm going with the 2019 quarterback group. And when I say the entire 2019 quarterback group, I'm referring to all of the quarterbacks. I think this is the worst group since 2013, as Mark Suba said. And I think it's so bad that you've got scouts imitating Coach Clyde from the Waterboy. And what I mean by that is you've got scouts going, this quarterback class sucks. It really, really sucks. And they're pretending to do opera, and they're saying, this quarterback class sucks. Remember like the scene in The Waterboy where Coach Klein basically tells Bobby Boucher that water sucks? That's what the scouts are doing when it comes to this quarterback class. They're pointing out how bad the quarterback class is, and it's so obvious that scouts are singing how much this quarterback class sucks. And then John Dorsey comes in and is like, hey, you assholes need to get your shit together. The door's right there if you don't get your shit together. That's how bad it is.
Well, here's the thing about this quarterback class. You have Herbert, which is, the kid's raw, but he's got all of the physical tools you need to really make an impact. Is it going to? Not right away, I don't think. He reminds me a lot of, I got a picture of the kid's face right in my head. Drafted by the Jets, not playing this week from injury.
Sam Darnold.
Yes, Darnold. For some reason, it's like I had a picture of his face in front of me.
Yeah, it's like he looks like Link in The Legend of Zelda with the whole Oregon green shirt thing. I get a Link vibe with him, but he's got to do a better job attacking the deep ball.
Do not insult The Legend of Zelda. Okay? It's awesome either way. But Justin Herbert he does remind me of, Sam Darnold. He's got the same turnover issues. And I think he has fewer issues coming out of Oregon than Darnold had. But at the same time, I also see him as probably not as prepared mentally as Darnold was. Darnold was the first one in the building, first one out. His work ethic was second to none. Even coming in, everybody's saying, well, Baker Mayfield was the hardest worker in the class and everything. Mayfield, say what you want about Hugh Jackson. He told Mayfield you had to be the first in the building and first out because Mayfield didn't understand it. So if Hugh Jackson did anything, it was that. Darnold didn't have to be told that. And that's where I see the difference between Herbert and Darnold. Darnold was a tireless worker. I see Herbert as he may need to learn you had to be the first in and first out. But I don't know if he has the mental strength of Baker Mayfield to just say, okay, and then do it. He may need to be brought along a little more, gingerly. And I see him as a project. Then you have Drew. And this is a guy that, Drew Lock, that he has talent. I think he is further along mentally than Herbert is, but he doesn't have all the physical tools that Herbert has. Herbert has a rocket arm. really bothers me that neither one of these guys, it's like, yeah, with Mayfield, you knew you had the leadership, a stronger than you would expect arm with a quick release. You knew with, to get out of trouble, just big guy loves the game. And then with Darnold, you had hardest worker in the draft who was just going to get in there, be the first in, first out, had issues with his mechanics, didn't quite read the defense well, still doesn't throw the ball very accurate over 7 yards. But you knew he was going to be there. You knew he was going to do all these things to get better, And then and those were the top two quarterbacks in the class. And then you look at Herbert and Locke, you can draw comparisons to Darnold. You don't really have anybody to draw comparisons to Mayfield with. And it's just like they're the top two quarterbacks. And then you have wild cards. You got from West Virginia. You got all these other guys who, once again, potential. And you know what? There's just, a lot of great potential in this class. I think it has more potential overall. I've said it for a year. More potential overall to have great players than last year's class did, where you were just top heavy. This one, I think you are, you may not be as top heavy. You have more potential in it to have better players overall. But at the same time, you have a lot more question marks than you did last year as well. And that is definitely a problem. And so I would rather take these guys in the bottom half of the first round than I would the top half, because I do not like the question marks each person brings.
Yes. And there's a lot of players in this board. Clellan Ferrell, good job making Grace cry. You're an asshole, but you're still a first-round pick. You just got a lot of talent on tape. And that goes for all the Clemson defensive linemen. Everyone except Austin Bryant's a first-round pick, and Clellan Ferrell was able to serve Anthony Monteiro. But we'll get to Monteiro later. Number 30, Dylan Mitchell out of Oregon. I did a film cut on him. He is a player who I now have a first-round grade on, and he's my number 2 wide receiver behind N'Keal Harry. I do have Anthony Johnson in the first round. I have Chase Winovich at 31 out of Michigan. He reminds me of Clay Matthews with his hair. And I have Anthony Johnson at 32. So I have 3 receivers with round 1 grades. I have N'Keal Harry at 8, Dylan Mitchell at 30, and Anthony Johnson at 32. I think a receiver is going to get pushed into the first round. I think Harry is going to be the first receiver picked, but I think a second or third receiver is going to get pushed into the first round. If Dylan Mitchell declares, it'll be because Herbert declares. If Herbert goes back, I think Dylan Mitchell probably returns with him. I think it's a two ducks declare or no duck declare. Either we get Duck Hunt NFL Draft Edition, we get the 2 ducks declaring, or they both return to Oregon to get for their senior seasons, because there are talks that Justin Herbert does want to go back to get his degree. So if that's the case, Dylan Mitchell probably returns, because Mitchell's got some things he needs to clean up, but he torched Cameron Bynum. I just did a film cut on him yesterday on our Facebook page. So he torched Cameron Bynum at Cal. Even though I'm a huge Bynum fan, he torched Bynum on tape to the point where he knocked Bynum out of the first round.
Yeah, and I'm just going to go out and say it. Right now, Anthony Johnson from Buffalo is still my number 1 receiver. That's just the way it is.
I love the variety of routes he can run on tape. He ran all 30 routes last year. I know he hasn't done that as consistently this year, but he's shown the ability to do it. And he's projected to run a 4.43 40 at the combine. I know Charlie Campbell said he could run a 4.58. Dane Brugler said he's run a 4.63. I know the 40 times are off, but until he gets a 4.40 time, he's a first-round receiver on my board, because I think his tape and his passion and unselfishness speaks for itself.
Well, let's look at it the way it is. I mean, he's only played 2 years. You know, he's not doing as well this year. He's only got 35 catches. He's got the speed. He's a good route runner. I mean, his actual... Now, here's something that really gets... Last year, he averaged 18 yards per reception. This year, he's averaging 20. Last year, he had 14 touchdowns. This year, he has 9. Okay? He's got 4 games to go. Now, so he's... And plays from scrimmage, I mean, his plays from scrimmage are way down. So he's not playing as much this year. So that is what you have to look at. He's not playing as much. He doesn't have the receptions. But when he gets the ball in his hands, he's averaging more yards. He's on pace to have the same amount of touchdowns. So, I mean, what's going to give here? Are you going to say, well, his stats just aren't the same, but he's the same big 6'2", 210-pound receiver that we saw? He's playing just as well overall. But that where we said he was the first receiver, he's the most talented receiver in the draft, if he take him first in the draft? Or are you going to say, well, he's not playing as much, he doesn't have as many receptions? But when he gets the ball in his hands, is he making the same plays? I'd argue he's making more plays. So, what's going to give here? Is it that he's just, you know, that's what I'm going to ask you, Chris. Which one of those, this is something I've argued several times, as a scout. Am I banging the gavel for him? Not at this point. I want to wait and see what these last 3 or 4 games get. But if I look and I see his production and what he does when he gets his hands on the ball is better than last year. I don't know what his percentage is when, catch to passes thrown to ratio. I don't think they keep that in college. I know they keep it in the pros, they don't keep it in college.
Yeah, and Ohio, they play one more game and then they play Ohio. They go to Athens in a few weeks, the Buffalo Bulls. And I had that game circled because I felt like Athens is going to be a good test for Anthony Johnson. I mean, that's going to be a good test for him. Javon Hagan, that secondary, that's going to be a good test for Anthony Johnson. It's really going to show us what he can do. And I feel like N'Keal Harry has major upside, like Randy Moss type upside. And Anthony Johnson out of Buffalo is one of my favorite receivers in this class too. Same with Dylan Mitchell. So I look at those 3 guys as the 3 players who could be difference makers at the next level in this class. But I feel like we're going to see 2 or 3 receivers get picked in the first round.
Well, Frank Solich always has that Ohio team ready to play. Last year, that was the MAC championship game. This year, probably going to be the MAC championship game. Good chance, I think. I know Buffalo's up there. I'm not sure what Ohio's record is right now.
I'm going to get the MAC standings up.
Frank Solich.
Because it's time for some action. It's time for some action. We talked about some MAC schools today. It is time for some action. Okay, the MAC East, Buffalo and Miami, Ohio are both in the MAC East. And with Buffalo being 6-0, they are right now, Buffalo is the #1 team in the MAC, 9-1, and they are Miami, Ohio's 4-2, Ohio's 4-2. So basically, Buffalo would have to lose their next 2 games in order to avoid the MAC East. And basically, they don't even have to beat Ohio in order to win the MAC East because they have a 2-game lead. They beat Miami, Ohio in head-to-head play. So they've already got a tiebreaker over Miami, Ohio. There's 2 games left. So they play Ohio to end the year. So if they win next week against a MAC school, they are in the championship, and they would play Northern Illinois, who is 6-0 in the West Division. Northern Illinois has Max Sharping and Sutton Smith, who we're going to get to in a bit. Yeah, Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois has got a good team this year.
Where'd they come from? They suck traditionally.
But Northern Illinois has Max Sharping at left tackle, who did well versus Boston College and Florida State. Brian Burns, and they have Sutton Smith, an edge rusher, who led the nation in sacks last year. So Northern Illinois is a good school. And I figured those were the 2 best teams this year.
As much as I like Buffalo, Ohio is probably going to spoil it for them. But Anthony Johnson, I think it will. Against Ohio, I don't know who they'll play after they win the MAC.
I'm going to look up their schedule. They get
Buffalo wins the MAC.
Okay, Buffalo and Ohio is this. Buffalo and Ohio's. Hold on, Joey. Buffalo, Ohio is actually this Wednesday, and then Buffalo ends the season at Bowling Green. So Buffalo would have to lose at Bowling Green and at Ohio to avoid the MAC championship. So even if Ohio beats Buffalo this Wednesday, they would need Buffalo to lose to Bowling Green, who's the worst team in the MAC East this year. That will not happen. So
Bowling Green's traditionally one of the worst teams in the MAC, so that's no.
So Ohio, even though Ohio's got 2 home games against Buffalo and Akron to end the year, the fact that Buffalo's getting Bowling Green to end the year and Ohio slaughtered Bowling Green 49-14, the fact that Buffalo's getting them, that means Buffalo's probably going to be playing in the MAC championship, even if Ohio pulls the upset in Athens.
Okay, well, I forgot what I was going to say. Thanks, Chris. But I will say this, is that Anthony Johnson, the 2 biggest games he's going to have are against Ohio and against whoever they play in the bowl game after they win the MAC.
And the Northern Illinois game could be big, too.
Games, they don't have a defensive backfield that Ohio does. So those will be the 2 biggest challenges for them because, Ohio's corners and safeties are going to come to play, and whoever they play, if they win the MAC, they'll probably get a pretty decent bowl game as long as they don't lose again.
Yeah, and if you're in Ohio, you need to watch the Anthony Johnson tape we posted last year. I remember last year Anthony Johnson got a touchdown in Ohio, and it looked like he was pretending to shoot Javon Hagan, like he was pretending with the football as a touchdown celebration. If you're Ohio, you cannot let that happen in Athens County. You cannot let Anthony Johnson do that to you in Athens. So, yeah, you cannot let him disrespect you like that in Athens because he's a loyal guy off the field, but when it comes to football, he's a savage. And you have to have that mentality if you're going to make it in the NFL. You have to be a savage on the gridiron. You have to. It's not an option. You have to be a savage on the gridiron.
Larry Fitzgerald's not. Fitzgerald apologized for spiking the football.
Well, Fitzgerald's a diplomat. Yeah. Fitzgerald's diplomatic about everything. And that's why people love Larry Fitzgerald.
No, he apologized to the children.
Yeah, that's my point. He didn't apologize to the players. He apologized to the children. That's a savage move.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
But moving on.
We got some round 2 players we need to get to.
Anthony Johnson. We've got a good bit of players. So let's go to another guy, number 36, Zach Allen, edge from Boston College. I mean, this is a guy, he doesn't look like much, but he's a pretty talented edge rusher. Chris, what do you have on Zach Allen?
Zach Allen actually looked very good versus Mitch Hyatt. Hyatt actually left the game injured. thanks to Zach Allen. Allen had Hyatt's number early in the game, and he even caused Hyatt to leave the game injured. Zach Allen doesn't really have the sack numbers you'd like, but he's very talented on tape. The tape speaks for itself. He did well next to Harold Landry. So I think Zach Allen, for me, he's a early second-round pick. I think he's a better fit for a 43 defensive end role than Landry was. Landry went to a 34 team in the Titans. So I think Zach Allen, most people have a first-round grade on Zach Allen. And I do love the tape. So he's a player who could creep into the late portion of the first round. But I like the Clemson's Austin Bryant slightly more. And Diggs and Cam Bynum were the other guys that we forgot to mention. I mentioned him briefly. And then Trevon Diggs, he missed a few games with injuries. He only has one deflection for Alabama. I'm sorry, if you're a cornerback on Alabama and you only have one deflection, I'm not giving you a first-round grade. You can complain to the show, Nick Saban. You can write some complaints to Lisa or whoever and have them punish me accordingly after the show, but it's not going to happen, Nick Saban. It's not. I'm not going to give Trevon Diggs a first-round grade, and there's nothing you can do about it.
And this brings me to...
I like this bull here, the West Virginia guy, Yandi Kajuste. He actually played a Texas edge player who had 7 sacks, 10 tackles for a loss, and next to that guy, you got Malcolm Roach. And Yandi Kajuste out of West Virginia shown he can mirror players. I was not high on this guy at first, but people are hyping him up like he's a first-rounder, and he's played well enough on tape for me to say, you know what, I'll put him in the top 40. I'll put him in the second round. So while a lot of people have had this guy high for a while, I'm finally coming around to giving him an early second-round grade, so that makes him a bull on my board. What were you going to add, Joey?
And, well, I was going to look at another bull that's coming up here right around the same range that these guys had. Plays the same position, kind of, as Kajuste. That's Michael Dater. Offensive tackle, guard, center, playing all three. I mean, I know he's played guard and tackle.
He began his career as a center, but he moved to left tackle after the guy, Ryan Ramczyk, got drafted. So he played center actually early in his career, but he moved to left tackle after. So he's been a 2-year starter at left tackle, but he feels like a guy who can play everywhere on the line.
Yeah, and tell me something. It's like, how is Wisconsin not better in the running game with both him and Bensawell? Like, I've never been able to pronounce.
And David
his name.
Edwards at right tackle. I saw them versus Penn State yesterday. Ben Schwale was the guy doing all the work.
The guard.
The tackles were subpar compared to Ben Schwale. That's what I saw from the tape.
Ben Schwale. Okay, yeah, it's like, with those two guys, how could you not be better in the running game? Because, in my opinion, they're both first-round talents. And you have Dieter at 39. If he goes in the second round, somebody's going to get a steal. That is, at 39, that far down, or you can look at right tackle there. I mean, there's a chance the Browns get rid of the guy they just signed, that former Steeler. You slip Dieter right in there as a starter. He is a starter waiting to happen. And then you look at who's next. Oh, David Edwards. Oh, another Wisconsin guy. But Wisconsin has, two guys who I think are first-round talent, and then you go to Edwards, I think he's an early second-round talent. So how is that offensive line not powering that offense to be better? How bad must the other people on offense be to not be able to rally behind those studs they have on the offensive line? So, I mean, I'm going to give a goal to the Wisconsin offensive linemen. Because right now, these are three of the best, 8 linemen in the draft coming from Wisconsin. And Wisconsin can't win I mean, it's kind of disappointing that you have that much talent and not much to show for it.
Yep. Ross Pierschbacher out of Alabama. I'm going to keep him. Dwayne Haskins out of Ohio State. I think Noah Fant, tight end 1. He was a first rounder at the beginning of the year, but doesn't really have the numbers you want. People are comparing him to Travis Kelce, but he doesn't have the numbers of a Travis Kelce type tight end. I think he can be talented, though. George Kittle had a lot of success at Iowa. Noah Fant's get over for him. He's the top tight end in the draft, but he's a bear for me because he's a guy who began the year in the top 15, and now he's at 43. So, and he's the only tight end in the top 100. I think Mark believes there's 3 tight ends in the first round talent. I do like Elijah Mack out of Notre Dame. He's finally putting things together this year, but I don't know if I would take him in the top 100 based off of with his academic suspension and what he's done off the field in the past, and the fact that he hasn't been able to maintain the starting tight end job. He's finally starting to maintain the tight end job, Elijah Mack out of Notre Dame, but Noah Fant for me is the only tight end in the top 100, and it's kind of sad. And then you got Derek Brown at all.
Now, a guy that you've got in here that I'm selling right now is Sutton Smith. Is like number 46, like Northern Illinois. He was the 2017 MAC Defensive Player of the Year. So that speaks for itself. But he is having a massively down year in every way except for sacks. Like, he doesn't have the tackles for loss. He doesn't have the overall tackles. I mean, he's still getting to the quarterback. He's still making turnovers, making the fumbles, which is, still a great thing that a lot of teams are going to look for. But he is, so when he gets to the ball, he's making the play. But he's not getting to the ball this year. I don't know if he got an injury or what, but last year he was all over the field. This year he is not all over the field. I mean, he's still doing everything right the way he did before, but he doesn't seem to have that athletic ability to get to the ball as much as he did last year, because he's just not getting there. Pass rush is good. Everything's good, but he's not getting to the ball. Chris, do you have anything that would say, hey, it's like guys has a bum ankle that he's playing through or what? Because I'm kind of curious as to why he's not producing as far as, hey, let's get to the ball and make things happen overall this year the way he did last year. Do you have anything, Chris?
No, Sutton Smith, I think this is the right spot for him. And that brings me to my next bear of the draft, the 2019 running back class. Benny Snell's still the top guy in the class, but there's another running back on this that just cracked the second round. But this running back class is not a strong running back class. And Benny Snell is the headline player, but he struggled versus Missouri a few weeks ago, almost to the point where you can knock him to the point where he's out of the first round. I think he's a mid-second round talent, but he's the top running back in the class. And then another guy who's a wild card is Curtis Weaver at Boise. He's a player that I really like on tape, but he's a sophomore redshirt, so he may not declare. But if he does declare, I think he could go. I liked him more than Leighton Vander Esch last year, if I'm being completely honest, when he was a freshman redshirt. So he's one of the better edges in this class. And AJ, now we got the 2 Ole Miss players at 49 and 50. AJ Brown and Greg Little. These are premium bargains at 49 and 50, and the only reason I moved A.J. Brown down is because he struggled versus Trevon Diggs and Greedy Williams. However, he has been red hot as of late, and he's been playing good against mediocre opponents. That's why I have him lower than most. DJ Metcalf got on IR, and he's stepped up, but he stepped up versus mediocre opponents. I want to see him do well against a good corner. He's got to do that if he wants to be in the same ballpark as Anthony Johnson, Dylan Mitchell, and N'Keal Harry. He hasn't done that yet. he's still a top 50 talent, and he's a steal at 49, but A.J. Brown hasn't done that yet. And Greg Little, I'm not a fan of his tape, to be completely honest. I think he's getting overhyped by the media, but I've seen some first-round grades on him, and he was a 5-star recruit in high school, so I could see why people like Greg Little as a draft prospect. Which of these Rebels would you rather build your team around?
Over who? Little and who?
A.J. Brown, the wide receiver. So you've got 2 top 50 players. They're Bears on my board. They're both Bears on my board. I'm going to give Ole Miss the Ole Miss University the Bear. And Draymond Jones is another Bear because it's a guy who could have gone in the first round, but he hasn't really done anything without Nick Bosa, but we'll put him at 51. It's time for a bull, though. A bull that could move up the boards. A bull I really like on tape is Texas cornerback Chris Boyd. This is a guy who played very well on tape versus West Virginia. I know one person, Carter Donick or whatever. He's pretty popular on Twitter. He's an upcomer, Rob Carter or something. But Chris Boyd, he had a first-round grade on Chris Boyd. I don't think Boyd's a first-rounder. I had him in the 3rd round, but I decided, you know what? Someone has him in the 1st round. I am in the 3rd round. I should move him up to the 2nd round. I watched his tape versus West Virginia wide receiver David Sills. He looked great in coverage versus David Sills. And Sills actually did well in that game versus Texas. He had over 100 receiving yards. So Chris Boyd out of Texas and David Sills, the 5th out of West Virginia, are 52 and 53 on my board. And Sills kind of reminds me of Cooper Kupp in the sense that his lack of speed may cause him to fall a little bit on the boards, but he looks very talented and extremely skilled. And these are both bulls on my board, Boyd and Sills. And a bull you mentioned is a first-rounder, Tavon Coney, is the next player at 54. I like his variety to play all 3 linebacker spots on Notre Dame. I did watch his tape, by the way, Joey. So what Boyd, Sills, or Coney? Do you think any of these 3 can sneak into the 1st round?
I think Sills probably has the best chance, but I see all 3 of them as 2nd-round players.
All right. And that brings us to number 55. We're going to be doing some pop culture references here with these next 2 picks. We've got Michael Jordan out of Ohio State at 55 and Michael Jackson out of Miami at 56. But let's start with Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan is clearly a better center prospect than Billy Price. I don't know why I feel that way, but I feel like he can maintain blocks and pass protection longer than Billy Price. But he's not as gritty in terms of run blocking as Billy Price. He's more durable. And he's got experience at all 3 spots in the O-line, interior O-line, just like Billy Price. So Michael Jordan out of Ohio State. He's a center, not a shooting guard. Michael Jordan, yeah, it was a horrible joke, but very convenient considering he's an interior offensive lineman. But Michael Jordan out of Ohio State, I think he's one of the better centers in this draft, and he looked good versus Michigan State. Yesterday, Michigan State's got some defensive tackles. So I'm curious to see what Michael Jordan does versus Rashawn Gary in a few weeks. That's going to be a fun matchup for when we see Ohio State host Michigan, because that's going to tell us a lot about Michael Jordan. Because if he can keep Gary in check in a few weeks, Michael Jordan's a player who could quickly ascend into the 1st round. And then he can wear Nike Michael Jordan shoes. And then we've got Michael Jackson. I want to watch Mayock make a reference about how Michael Jackson moonwalks better than any cornerback in the draft. I want that at the combine this year. So Michael Jordan and Michael Jackson, who would you rather have on your football team?
I don't know if you're making the jokes neither.
But we've got a center / guard and a cornerback.
You're bombing at this, Chris.
I'm making pop culture references, and I set it up on purpose so that we mention both players and just get them out of the way. So I set it up on
well,
purpose like that. I failed miserably in that regard, I guess. Quan Johnson at 57. This is a guy that Mark believed was the top safety in the draft the preseason. I do like his tape. I don't love his tape, but he's solid enough to earn a day 2 pick. Next player on my board, Connor McGovern. He played center at Penn State the last 2 years. He moved to right guard this year. He's better fit at guard, in my opinion, but he's a talented player. He could probably play at all 3 spots on the interior, and he's a guy that I guess you could say he's a bull compared to Aaron Monteiro and Mitch Hyatt. They're both Bears. These are guys that I was expecting to be higher on the board, but they're 59 and 60. Any thoughts on the rest of the top 60 before we get to some of the players left with round 2 grades?
Well, I am looking at number 62. And 60, not so much.
Bars is on IR, so I'm just going to put a bounty on him, and we're going to talk about Singletary. Because Devin Singletary, my friend Kyle Taylor, who covered the high school page, he pointed out a few weeks ago when we were hanging out that Devin Singletary is running back 2 behind Benny Snell. And I watched Singletary's tape. If Singletary's stats are eye-dropping, and his blocking is better than Benny Snell. His pass catching is also better than Benny Snell. But he had 67 yards versus Oklahoma on 18 carries. That's why he's running back 2. If he had a big game versus Oklahoma, he'd be running back 1. It wouldn't even be close. I honestly think Devin Singletary is that underrated as a prospect, but he's 5'9", and Mark thinks that makes him a day 3 pick. But as far as talent goes, as far as production goes, he's the most productive running back in this class, not named Benny Snell. And I'm willing to look past the fact that he's 5'9" because I think this is that bad of a running back class.
Well, I'd go with the day 2 pick because no matter what you say about height, because normally I'd agree with height, but when you're under 5'10".
When you have 50 rushing touchdowns in the past 2 years, I can't ignore that. He had 32 in 2017 and 18 this year. I can't ignore that.
But at the same time, I'm looking at what can you do from scrimmage? It's like, are you making positive yards from scrimmage? Are you making positive plays from the line of scrimmage? And what do I see when I look into that? I see 63 touchdowns over the last 3 years. I see 6.3 yards average. I see 4,352 yards. Like, from scrimmage, he's getting what you need. From the eye test, he hits holes hard. So, you're hitting holes hard. You're getting the yards. You have good hands out of the backfield. That screams first-round talent. But the fact that you're 5'9", that means you're a second-round talent because you are not going to have that physical intangible. And so, first-round talent on the skill level, physical intangibles, based on measurables, he's a second-round talent, third-round talent. So, second round.
Yep, Devin Singletary, second-round talent. And we end round 2 with some corners. Levante Taylor, Florida State corner. He can play both sides. I think he's a good corner on tape, round 2 guy. And a guy that is my next bull is a guy who Mark brought up, a late addition to the draft game, Bryce Hall out of Virginia. He looks very good versus Ohio. Frustrated Poppy Brown in that Ohio Bobcats offense. So, Bryce Hall for me is a guy that I really like. And he came in at 64. And then he's a player that I think stands out. So he's a bull for me. Will Grier, I'm not buying the Will Grier hype, but he had a comeback versus Texas last week, so screw it. Let's give him 65 because he had that 2-point conversion in the comeback. And then 66 through 70 is Oklahoma's entire offensive line.
Yeah, this is where I say you got lazy. It's like, well, Oklahoma's got some good offensive linemen. Let's just put them all in a row. Now, at the same time, I will go full on all of these guys.
I think they're all top 70 talents, but I'm just not sure who's going to move, who's going to declare, who's going to go back yet. Because Bobby Evans was originally a first-rounder on boards, but I saw reports he might go back. Chase Ford's a first-rounder on Tony Mario's board. You have a first-rounder on Ben Powers. And Drew Samia is a guy who's going to get a Senior Bowl invite. And Alvarez was one of my favorite centers. I thought he was going to declare last year, but he got injured and redshirted. So I like all these guys, honestly.
Well, I've watched a lot of Oklahoma football over the last few years. Being a huge Baker Mayfield supporter, I've gotten a chance to watch these guys since Mayfield was a freshman. Well, not a freshman, I guess a sophomore coming in because he did redshirt at Texas Tech. Seems like he was a freshman, though. He's older than other quarterbacks in his class. But I look at him and I say, easily, the best offensive lineman on this team is Ben Powers, the guard. Guy is good at everything. Everything. When you run the ball in Oklahoma, you run behind Ben Powers. What was the best position where did Baker Mayfield like to throw? He was always looking around Ben Powers. Ben Powers is the one guy who's going to get you everything you need to get. He is one of the top guards. I'd say he's a top 4 guard in his class. He is a second-round prospect. I say he's right there with, I say if he has a great combine, and a great bowl game, he could be a first-round prospect. You're going to have people talking about this guy. I mean, he is just a great player, and he's got the look. He has the look to go along with it. He's got the mohawk. He's got that little goatee. He doesn't have a full goatee. He's just got the little goatee going down his chin, a little bit of chin hair. It looks all business. So he's got the look, he's got the skill, he's got everything you want in an offensive lineman. And I think he is the top offensive lineman on the Oklahoma team. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put full on him because I think he could very easily get into the top 40 by the end of the year. He is that good. Go back and watch tape on him because he'll stand out. I hear Chris over there looking up tape on Mr. Powers.
Yep, Mr. Powers and the entire Oklahoma offensive line. I'm going to go through the tape after the show. 71, Troy Dye out of Oregon. I like this guy, but he has not made the leap that I thought he was going to make. But he's definitely a top 75 player. I do like Darrell Williams. I don't love Darrell Williams, but I like him enough to the point where I think he can be a starter. 73 and 74, Colin Johnson and Denzel Mims. Colin Johnson's not had the production of a first or second round pick, so I have a third-round grade on him. But he's too talented to fall to day 3 for me. And I know some people have Denzel Mims as wide receiver 1 based on the tape they've seen. I do like Denzel's tape, but he's not a player that stands out. And then my number 3 safety, Luka Dennis out of Boston College. I really like this guy on tape. I pinpointed him as a sleeper at the start of the year. I think this is the top 75. And then after this, This is where you begin to see the drop off. But Joe Jackson of Miami.
Well, Chris, what does that say about the safety class when the number 3 safety is 75? I mean, that does not speak well to the safety class.
Yeah, and last year you had a lot more depth at safety, and this is because Javon Hagan. Well, if Javon Hagan was in this class, this would be a stronger safety class, but I think he's going to go back. And you look at Deontay Thompson, Jaquan Johnson, Luka Dennis. At the beginning of the preseason, my top 3 were Hagan, Johnson, and Dennis. And I had first, second, third round grades on all of those safeties at the time. So basically, Deontay Thompson replaced Javon Hagan, and the rest is history. And this is a horrible safety class. I've been trying to tell you this since the start of the year, that this is the worst safety class since 2011, where Raheem Moore was the number 1 safety drafted.
I can't even remember what I was doing at the start of yesterday. So, I mean, you talk about the start of the year. I mean, come on, man.
I mean, all right.
Give me a little credit.
All right. It's fun. Joe Jackson, Miami, Florida's defensive end, edge. He's at 76. Jalen Jelks at 77.
Now, yeah, tell me something, Chris. Tell me something. How does Michael Jackson feel knowing his dad's also in the same NFL draft class?
What, is Joe Jackson Michael Jackson's actual father? Like, is that the actual first name of Michael Jackson's father? Now I have to look
I believe so, yes.
I have to look it up now, because Michael Joseph Jackson. Okay, so yeah, that's just convenient timing as far as the joke goes. And he was dubbed the King of Pop. And yep.
Yeah, he got popped all right.
Yep. Okay, so he was the 8th, and his mother, Catherine, his father, Joseph Walter Joe Jackson. So yes, Joe, he's a former boxer. That's why Joe Jackson is Michael Jackson's father. That's and they're both on the U. That's just, I love how you set that up. I got to give you credit for that, Joey. I have to. Good job. You've earned a beer for that.
Thank you.
Like, when I come down to Jacksonville, you're getting a free beer for that.
There's always room for free beer.
Yeah, and I know how to make eggs because I was watching Chef Ramsay's tutorial on how to do it. So I can help you with that too, but I think you just rather have the beer. So we'll just go with the beer.
Yeah, the beer works.
Yeah, Ugo Chukwu Amadi out of Oregon. This is a guy who looked good against Cal. He's Oregon's best cover player. I know Thomas Coburn's not a big fan of him, but he could be a day 3 pick, and he might be someone that gets pushed up the boards. The safety class is that bad. I like him more than Washington's Taylor Rapp. So Amadi actually impressed me versus Cal, and I'm still working on the film cut for that game. But Amadi was someone who actually impressed me a lot in that game, so he comes in at 78. And then we get some receivers after some Oregon players. Marcus Brown, Kelvin Harmon, Jalen Samuels, and a bunch of these receivers. Brown's a slot guy like Sterling Shepard, but he's faster. Kelvin Harmon actually looked decent. Jalen Smith's been underperforming all year, but all these guys could be day 2 picks. It just feels like a crapshoot after the top 75 at receiver, to be completely honest. David Montgomery, he did get ejected against Baylor yesterday, Iowa State running back. Some people think he's the top running back in the draft, and I do like what he brings to the table, but the fact that he got into a fight, that makes me wonder how much self-control he has as a player. I have him at 82, but I think he's a top 100 talent, and he's talented. I mean, Rodney Anderson follows him. He got on injured reserve, out for the year. And then you got Hakeem Butler, an Iowa State teammate of David Montgomery, who's been on fire up until the last week. And then you got Myles Gaskin, so you at 85, and Damian Harris at 86. So you've got 4 running backs from 82 to 86. 4 of the next 5 picks are running backs. So Montgomery, Rodney Anderson, Myles Gaskin, Damian Harris. Which running back are you looking at at this point in the draft?
I would look at Harris. I mean, because I want to see more from him. Like, I know he's got talent, but I want to see more from him.
Yeah. Andre Dillard, left tackle for Washington State. I do really like this guy. He was a left tackle for Luke Falk last year. He looks good. I know Cole Madison was a right tackle. They had Cody O'Connell, but Andre Dillard was the left tackle. He's a draft prospect, top 100 pick for sure. Deebo Samuel out of South Carolina is finally healthy again. He's another guy who's fast, very electric, great on tape, could be a top 100 pick. DK Metcalf got season-ending IR and is a sophomore redshirt, but there are some draft boards that actually had him ahead of A.J. Brown, but he's a sophomore redshirt. I honestly think he needs to come back. And you've got DeMarcus Lodge, his teammate, who's a senior. So both these guys declare Metcalf could go earlier than this if he blows it up at the combine, but I feel like Metcalf needs to return to school. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on the Ole Miss receivers. I don't think either is as good as A.J. Brown, Joey. I think Brown's the headline receiver on this team. Any thoughts on these Ole Miss receivers and Deebo Samuel, any of these receivers? Or we want to get to the quarterbacks. We've got Stidham, Shea Patterson at 91, 92. And the quarterback class, we've already acknowledged how bad it is. But TJ Edwards at 93 out of Wisconsin's a middle linebacker I like. He's very talented on tape, but he hasn't shined this year like he did last year. So he's a player who's a bear, sort of dropped on the boards a little bit, but still talented regardless. Then we get to some linemen at 94 and 95. Martez Ivey can play tackle or guard. I think he's a better fit at guard, but he can play tackle too, and he can play either side. So I think Martez Ivey's a guy that could be a tweener, but I think he's worth a flyer here at 94 at some point in the late third round. You could say the same about Caleb McGarry. He's going to be the top lineman on Washington now that you've got Trey Adams going back. I think McGarry's one of these players that worth keeping an eye on. And we've got 6 players to go, Joey, and then we'll be done with this show. Or we can do picks, but afterwards, it's your call. But Darren Hall out of Pittsburgh is a guy Mark has been telling me about nonstop. I watched his tape last year. He's been hot as of late. So Darren Hall out of Pittsburgh, 96. And then you got Taylor Rapp. Yeah, he's taking some bad angles, but Taylor Rapp is still a top 100 player in this class. And then you've got Mack Wilson, the Alabama linebacker. I like to see more from him. He's probably better than 98. I've seen him in the first round in a few mocks. And then the USC linebackers, Porter Gustin and Cameron Smith out of USC, round out my top 100. And I think this is a pretty good top 100 overall, Joey. I'm kind of surprised we got through everything in 90 minutes. But this is a strong class as far as the top 100 goes. And I think we did a nice job cleaning up the board from last time when there were a few players in the draft game. You wanted them on the board. We didn't get them. So we went through, we added those players, we added a top 100, and then we modified the board based on that. So I think we did a good job in that regard. And I'm going to end the Google Hangout. We can still talk about some other topics like predictions, but this is the end of the Google Hangout.